Hello and welcome to Unclog, the Zoom Drain podcast. This episode features Dan Antonelli, founder and CEO of KickCharge Creative. For more than 30 years, Dan has helped home service companies build brands that stand out, earn trust, and drive growth. Through KickCharge, he's worked with thousands of home service companies, including Zoom Drain, to create memorable brands that make a lasting impact. He's also the author of Branded, Not Blanded, a book that I believe should be required reading for anyone in the home service industry, whether you're a business owner, a marketing manager, or a franchise leader. In this episode, we discuss the power a quality brand has on a business, how strong branding drives every other marketing channel and improves ROI on digital campaigns, and how it directly impacts customer trust, enhances recruiting, and drives average ticket prices. We also dive into where so many home service companies get branding wrong, the risk of relying on AI-generated content to build a brand, and what it takes to stand out in today's crowded marketplace. Let's get flowing. Thanks for joining us today. I want to start with the basics for somebody watching this who's either working in franchising or specifically in home services. I want to talk about branding and the impact of a quality brand because some people, I still think they get tripped up on what it means and why it's important. So I have a couple of quotes I'll reference throughout today's program. The first one I have: the most expensive logo you'll ever buy is one you paid the least for. What does this mean? What is a brand, and what is a brand beyond just the logo?
So, it's an interesting quote because it touches upon the core message of the book, and that is that the weaker the brand is, the more money you will need to market it. And you see a lot of owners make the mistake of trying to get a logo design done the cheapest way possible and not fully understanding how that one decision will then affect so many other points in their marketing and negatively affect those marketing channels, especially because, when you're unremarkable with your brand in the community that you're trying to serve, it just takes more impressions and it takes more money for people to understand who you are and what you do. So the thought behind the book is, what if you had a remarkable brand? What would happen to your business? How would it affect your marketing spend and all your other marketing channels? And also, how would it affect the KPIs that matter most to an owner? So, booking rates, close rates, average tickets, customer acquisition cost, all those things are really impacted by branding. And so, the point of the book when I wrote it was, you see so many common mistakes that are made very early on in the journey for a owner. And the first one they typically get wrong. I mean, naming is one that they get wrong very often as the first thing that they get wrong. And then the second thing is, actually, as they go to build a brand, is the brand going to function in a manner that, you know, communicates brand promise, um, delivers the message of trustworthiness, honesty, good ethics, and is also just sticky. A lot of what the book talks about is just building a brand that is sticky so that the consumer can recall it later on. And I think that's the other key piece, especially as it relates to marketing spend and especially as it relates to digital marketing, is, what if everyone within 5 miles of your community knew you existed? And instead of going to Google and typing in plumber near me, they typed in Zoom Drain. Well, what would that mean? And how much cheaper would it be for you to acquire a customer at that point?
Yeah, I love that. I actually wrote that down too, the idea of being 5 mile famous. So people
Mhm.
already know who you are when they have a problem. They're not discovering you for the first time through a PPC search that you, as the
Yeah,
business owner, pay way too much money for per click. But this whole idea
absolutely.
of brand awareness. So can you talk to me a little bit more specifically? One, what are some of the qualities of a, let's just call it a bad brand? And I know there are so many, but what are some of the most common? You mentioned naming conventions. Like what's an
Mhm.
example of a bad idea for a name? Not calling anybody out, right? But the types of names that
Yeah,
we see that are
yeah, yeah.
remarkable.
First off, initial based brands, meaning, ZD Plumbing and Heating, would be a really terrible idea. Any initials are generally speaking, very, very difficult for people to remember. So a lot of people are like, oh, I'm just going to use my initials, like DA Heating and Air. The problem is there's no specific visual that I can assign to have people latch on to the idea of DA, let's just say as an example. And secondly, there's no inferred promise with it. The promise comes to repetition of the advertising campaigns and having people eventually associate something to do with those initials, if ever. But the reality is it takes so much money for that to ever happen that you're so much better off just having a name that already exhibits a promise. And if you want to look at Zoom Drain as a name that exhibits promise, well, what is it doing for me? What is it telling me? Well, I've got a problem in my house and these guys are going to fix it fast. They're going to make my pain go away fast. But if it was ZD drain, well, where's my inferred promise? I don't have one. And I would need a ton of marketing for me to associate ZD plumbing with a specific promise. So the idea is lead in with something that already gives us the promise in a more succinct fashion. Last name brands have the same challenge, generally speaking. So when you think about a last name brand, again, repetition over time, maybe you can start to infer a specific promise. But generally speaking, it requires a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of marketing that goes into having someone associate a promise. So if it was Antonelli Plumbing, well, and I didn't know who you were and I just saw the truck, well, what do I think I'm going to get based on that last name? And now granted, KickCharge has done probably 3,000 home service brands at this point, probably a little bit more. And I would say we've done at least 1,000 last name based brands. So I'm not here to tell you it can't work, but I will say that if you have the opportunity to start a company, or you are a company that is maybe only a year or two into it and only a million or less in revenue, that's actually still a great time to really think about names and whether or not it's something you want to continue. A lot of the renames that we do, like last year, we probably renamed about 75 home service companies, and the bulk of them were last name based brands or initial based brands. And again, just they were not gaining any traction. People didn't know who they were. And the other part of it too is there's no specific visual that you can assign to it. So if it was ZD plumbing, let's just say, well, yes, I can make a symbol related to water or pipes or plumbing. I can do that, right? But that only tells me the what. It doesn't tell me the who, right? So the visual doesn't connect with the name of the company. It just only connects with the service. Ideally, if I have the visual and it connect to the service, um, it's much easier for the mind to process that and remember it and store it. So, there's an old saying that talks about repetition and how long it takes for a brand to become memorable or for someone to know a name. And the sort of the general rule of thumb, if it takes 16 to 20 impressions before a brand is remembered. And I always look at that and I say, well, what if you could cut that down to five? Like, what would that mean for your business? Five impressions, and have it be a sticky brand. Like, so that's sort of the notion behind that. But yeah, that's definitely some of the mistakes make early on is definitely naming.
Yeah, man, I like how you talked about when the name and then the brand and the logo kind of tells the story. It's inherent in the name, or even if it's a last name. I'm sure like you said, you've worked with thousands of businesses that use a last name. I'm sure you haven't converted all of them. You haven't talked all of them into dropping the last name, but then they surround it with a really high quality tagline and better visuals, right, to
Yeah,
help tell that story up front. You mentioned it makes it memorable. It tells the story. There's less guessing, and then the impact that has on brand awareness in general. And really, I'm looking at it from an ROI standpoint. Like, what do you see happening with your customers from a digital perspective? Because everybody's so hooked on digital marketing. It's still a critical piece of the business.
sure.
Uh,
Yeah,
but I keep trying to teach everybody, like, hey, we got to get the brand out there. They have to know who Zoom Drain is before they have a problem. And
right.
you worked with our brand about 10 years ago. And I want to get into a
Correct.
little bit later what you saw 10 years ago and how you helped us transform Zoom Drain into what it is today. But not everybody's Zoom Drain right now. How do we help them kind of think about this more strategically and think of it as part of their digital efforts and look at the overall budget and ROI because it's all one big puzzle.
Yeah. I think to your point on ROI, and especially as you look to digital, one of the key metrics that we look at is branded keyword searches and the effect that rebranding has on branded keyword searches. And when I published the second edition of the book, what I focused a lot more in the second edition is I added an entire chapter on data. I wanted to really be able to demonstrate what the effects that we had seen for some of these companies on those KPIs, especially the digital KPIs. And so you really start seeing a radical shift in how many times people are searching in the brand name now versus generic keywords that we're paying or needing to pay a ton of money. Like, how much cheaper is it to show up high for your own brand name, especially if it's a unique brand name? Right. So Zoom Drain, I'm sure there's people probably bidding on your keywords just as a you know a countermeasure. But the reality is, it's a very easy name to remember. I don't need a lot of explanation to understand what you do. I don't need a lot of corresponding graphics to explain it. We do have a mark that we designed that was originally designed for Zoom Drain that is used with Zoom Drain, but it's meant to accompany it. And it has all the hallmarks of what you want to see in a brand name. So, the metrics that matter for us are acquisition costs. So how much does it cost to acquire a company with a branded keyword searches versus a non-branded keyword search? And sometimes it's double. Like, sometimes it's honestly just double the amount of money we're going to spend. And so when you look at digital, like the notion that people use for digital is that I'm just going to keep spending more money. I'm just going to keep spending more money. And it's I almost say like Google is like crack to a lot of home service contractors, because you get the rush, you will get the lead, but you never solve the fundamental problem of why you need to spend so much to get that lead. And so when we talk about the idea of being 5 Mile famous, and what can we do so that they think of us when they need service? Because 98% of the people who see your truck on a daily basis don't need your service that day. They don't.
Right.
Like, that's why we don't believe in QR codes on truck wraps, because it's not point of purchase. It's not how it was really designed or ever intended to function. But I need it to live in their mind so that a month from now, when the sewer backs up or the plumbing is messed up, like, what was that company that we kept seeing in the neighborhood? Oh yeah, Zoom Drain, Zoom Drain, Zoom Drain, right? And so they just go on Google and type in Zoom Drain, and then we show up. Even if we're paying, we're not going to be paying what we would be paying for a plumber near me, and we get the lead that way. Because again, the idea of know, like, and trust is really critical for us as well. So they've seen the truck in the community, they saw it on the highway, they saw it on my neighbor's driveway, but they were also at the community event. I saw them at the 4th of July parade, they were at the home show, they're sponsoring the little leagues, right? So those are all the things that guys sometimes don't want to invest in because it takes effort and it's not
Yep.
nearly as sexy as some other things. But sometimes they're just like, it's easy. Let me just write a check to Google. Let me just write a check to Google. And like, you can do that. Like, I get it. But the idea is, what if everyone within 5 miles of where your office was knew you existed? What would that do for your business? Like, would you need to even spend all this extra money on advertising if everyone in your community knew you existed? But the reality is like, there's a study I quote in the book that 84% of the people looking for a home service contractor have no idea who to call. Imagine that. Like, 84% of the people you want to sell to have no idea you exist. And so what do? They go on Google and they type in, plumber near me. So it's this endless cycle until you start addressing the core issue, which is a unremarkable brand is just going to cost you forever. But if you invest in branding, that investment will just pay those dividends forever. And it's not even just a marketing metric. It's culture, it's recruitment, it's all these other things that go along with it. But for most owners, instinctively, they're looking at it from the marketing metrics that matter. But then they get a new brand and they see what it does for the culture. They see what it does for recruitment. They see what it does for their own mindset. And those are just the added benefits of it.
You mentioned recruitment. For a lot of home service brands, attracting and retaining top talent is one of the
Mhm.
biggest struggles because, if you don't have a strong company culture, a technician will leave you for another $2 an hour,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
What's the correlation or the association between a strong brand? And let's just look at recruitment, not even retainment, but
Sure.
retention, but just attracting top talent. Because I don't think people connect those dots very often either.
Well, you look at a company that decides to go through a rebrand and you think about what that actually signals to the people that are on staff. And typically, what it means to them is, well, leadership is investing more into branding because they're investing into the future of this company. They believe that this is an important step for our growth. They believe that by doing this, it will create more opportunities for myself and my family. So, the way in which rebrands get rolled out and how that strategy is communicated to the internal audiences is just as important as what gets communicated to the people that you are trying to sell to. But when you look, to your point, when you look to some of the challenges that owners have in trying to recruit top tier talent, and you'll hear a lot of owners just say, I can't find good people. No one wants to work for me. And sometimes I see these posts on Facebook with people saying that. And then I go look at their branding and the truck that they will drive and the uniform that they will wear. And I say to myself, I know why no one wants to work for you, because you don't look like a company that I would want to represent and be a part of. You look at Tommy Mello and what his technicians get on day one. They get the best set of tools possible. They get a brand new truck that they're going to be driving. They have great uniforms. Obviously, they have great benefits and great culture and great pay, and those are all parts that go along with it. But you can't look at his organization and say, this looks like a hack shop. This looks like something I wouldn't be proud to be a part of. And a lot of owners underestimate that impact that brand has on their internal culture for sure.
Yeah, it legitimizes the operation internally and then externally too. So you have a in the book. I have a quote here. The reason why so many home service businesses hit a wall with their growth and struggle to achieve higher ticket prices is because they offer no legitimate reason for a homeowner to feel good about paying for their service. So we just
Mhm.
talked about how a strong brand kind of legitimizes an operation and makes people want to work for that company. What does the brand do for customers as far as building trust and making it seem like a legitimate organization that will do the job right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a great question. And one of the sections in the book early on, I talk about the brand wheel and I talk about how in the center of this brand wheel is the logo, and around that wheel are all the touch points that communicate messages to the people that you are trying to sell. So you have your outdoor, you have your truck wraps, you have social media, your website, your uniforms, brochures, direct mail, all those things are around that wheel. And obviously the hub of that wheel, it stems from the logo itself. So if you don't get that logo correct, it's very difficult to build a round wheel from, right? But every one of those touch points are communicating something to the people that you are trying to sell to. So what is it actually saying to them? Is it saying to them, we will be on time, we will be respectful of your property, we will be honest, we will be trustworthy, we will deliver value with our services. So everything that we try to do when we think about branding is we try to create an impression of what the deliverable will be before you ever get to ring the doorbell or have a CSR answer the phone from them. So if I can control what Mrs. Jones believes, and she's who the target audience is, like that, you hear me talk about that in the book a lot. What can we do to make her feel something about the experience she would get if she chose to hire you? And branding isn't complex in that notion. It's what are we doing to make them think they're going to get a superior service from you? Because otherwise, if they think you're the same as everyone else, then cost becomes the deciding factor. Well, why would I go with Zoom Drain when I can go with ACX plumbing and they're half the price? Well, will there be a warranty? Are the technicians trained? Do they have fully stocked trucks? Like, so all the things we do that we can try to add value into why we need to charge what we charge. But if we can't distinguish that, then the consumer just picks the lowest common denominator at that point, or the lowest cost. So when you have guys that hit roadblocks about average tickets, And everyone wants to raise their average tickets. I get it, and I understand that. But quite often, you fail to give the consumer a valid reason to believe that they should pay a premium for your service. And if you can't validate your pricing in her mind, then you don't get the sale. Like it's not complicated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they're going to go somewhere cheaper because you haven't demonstrated that there's a reason to pay a premium for it. And a lot of times the brand signals that. It's like if there's a white truck on the driveway with a magnetic sign, I don't expect to pay a lot of money for the service. I don't. Like, I don't care how good, the logo on the magnetic sign is. I'm not paying a lot of money for the service. So there's a lot of those trust signals that go out with branding, and we just want to control them as best we can.
Yeah, real life example of that. My parents' neighbor had some work done, and first operation, first outfit that came over in a white van, maybe a magnet. I don't even think there was that much. The guy got out of the truck, just looked like a slob.
Yeah.
Pants are falling down, shirt's not tucked in. Could have used a haircut. Um, a week later, they had to call somebody else,
Right.
and they started cycling through. And when I asked my parents, I said, "Well, did they get it resolved?" He said, "Well, I haven't talked to them, but I think so because the last truck that pulled up was fully wrapped. It looked really professional. The guy who got out of the truck looked like he had his shit together, and that's coming from the neighbors who are watching from afar. But
Mhm.
just the impact, like they think the job was taken care of because of the way the technician and the business represented
Look.
themselves when they showed
Yeah.
up. Yeah, I mean, looks are
Yeah.
important. It's not just dating, right? Like
Yeah.
we make a lot of
A lot of
assumptions on the way
judgments
that.
being made. It's just the reality of the world that people judge by what they see,
Yeah,
and all we want to do is do our best to put our best foot forward in that equation. And I think the other thing that I think is important to note is the people, generally speaking, that we work with, and this was true back when Ellen had us redesign the brand for you guys, is a lot of companies provide a great service. They just don't look like they provide a great service, right? So if you were to judge them again on what you're being presented, it's like I I don't get there. Like I can't get there to think that this is going to be an amazing experience. But maybe when you ring the doorbell, you've got the booties, you've got all the systems down, you've got great CSRs. Maybe that helps me at that point. But I'm trying to control all the things that happen before that because if I can't accomplish that before then you may not get the call ever. And if you
that's
don't get
right.
the call ever, you don't even get a chance to prove how great you are. But what if I can show them how great you are before you ever get to ring the doorbell? That's why, like, when we look at the data as far as even just booking rates post rebrand, like you see an uptick in the booking rates without changing anything operationally. Again, because the person is making the call has a higher expectation of the service.
I love that. Yeah, all of this. It just marketing is one big puzzle, and nothing acts alone. It's the brand, it's
Mhm.
the customer experience, it's all the spokes on the wheel that you mentioned earlier, and they all have to come together.
We studied and we looked at data from another web design and digital marketing company that had 25 websites that had a KickCharge brand versus 25 that did not have a KickCharge brand. And first of all, it was getting 10 times the number of branded keyword searches with a KickCharge brand versus a non. So then I said, well, what happened when they came to the website? How many booked a call and converted?
Yeah,
And the KickCharge brands were converting at 12% versus 6% for brands. So we had 10 times the number of inbound clicks for branded keyword searches. And then we had double the conversions with a KickCharge brand versus a non-KickCharge brand. So we know that all those trust signals that are happening in the community are impacting the behavior of the consumer once they actually came to the site. So again, like you're getting double the conversion rates when they hit the site. So even if it was a paid ad at that point and you're paying for the click and it doesn't convert, like that hurts, right? That sucks. That's awful, right? They came to the site, they didn't do it, they didn't take any action. They
yeah,
still paid for the click though, right?
paid for. Yeah,
So
yeah,
so again, like a lot of times digital marketing companies especially, and we have an amazing digital marketing company who's so focused on those specific metrics. Um, when we have a digital marketing client that hasn't branded with us yet, That's something that we're trying to illustrate to them. We're trying to show, hey, if you make this investment in brand, and they love the results we get for them now, but I'm like, if you think these results are good, imagine if we had a better brand, how those metrics would really be affected even better, right? So that's sometimes I think the challenge, especially when you look at digital, is digital marketing companies typically are not setting out to solve a fundamental problem in your branding. They're trying to get more eyeballs on your site, and I get it, and that's obviously something really good and part of their mission. But in many times they never solve the root problem that the owner has, and that's that they have an unremarkable brand. It's really hard to market an unremarkable brand. I don't care how great of a digital marketer you are. If the brand sucks, it's really hard to get the clicks, to get the calls. Like it's not right. That's not complicated. Like that's pretty obvious.
100%. I was a guest on a webinar this week, and we're talking about storytelling. It was more about content and production, but it's all again tied together. And they asked me what was I most proud of during our time working together, and we created a what to expect video, Dan, that outlines exactly what every customer should expect when they call Zoom Drain, and it outlines their entire process. I said I'm so proud of that piece because without a world-class customer experience, without providing quality service or selling a quality product, none of it matters. Like the
Right.
branding, the marketing, the advertising, none of that matters if you don't deliver on all the things that you promise to your customers. So I think the same thing with your marketing. You're absolutely right. It's hard to kind of outmarket a bad brand. And if you're going to do so, you're going to spend a whole lot of money trying to do it. And I love this portion of the conversation because it makes it real. I think people hear branding and they hear, it's talking about a brand, and they think it's like a nice to have. It's like a fluffy
Mhm.
part of
Yeah.
marketing. Everybody wants to talk just about digital, and they're looking at the bottom of the funnel and they want to know their ROI. But like it's all so tied together. You're going to save so much money if you make the investment now. And you mentioned something earlier that sparked a memory from the book. Like there's going to be no cheaper time for you to rebrand your business than there is right now. It doesn't get easier. It doesn't get cheaper as your business evolves.
It's funny when you talk about, the notion of when is the best time to do this. And we were at Pantheon last year and we had probably 100 or 200 of our clients at that event too. So we did a bunch of video content with them and I was talking to them and I kept on hearing the same thing that they mentioned time and time again. And that was, I wish I had done this sooner. And everyone thinks, again, like you just noted, that it's a nice to have, not necessarily a need to have, and they don't truly understand. But no one goes through the process and then afterwards is like, yeah, it was all right. It's always like, oh my god, I wish I had done this sooner.
Yeah.
And you said something earlier too that I thought was really cool about the video that you talked about, that about what to expect, right? And think about that video and imagine, and I don't know if you're doing this now, I'm sure you're doing it in a similar fashion, but imagine that before the technician arrives at the home, that there's a text that goes out and the text has a link to that video explaining what that
There
process
is.
looks like, what's going to happen when your technician arrives, who your technician is, what his family is like, where he's from the community. Like imagine all these little things that are being put out as signals of trust to that homeowner. And I work a lot with the guys at Chirp, and we have some really cool campaigns that I've seen them run for people in a very similar fashion, but they're all about communicating that difference. Now you think about you sending that video out and talking about what the difference is about hiring Zoom Drain and what that process looks like. Maybe they got two other estimates. No one else is doing something like that.
Nope.
They're not sending out a message that's
No.
talking about what to expect when your technician arrives today. Little things like that. Like I even talked to Aaron Gainer from Eco Plumbers, and I was talking to Justin from Chirp, and he was telling me a campaign that they came up with together for Aaron for projects that they don't get. Right. So
Yep.
imagine this: like they didn't get the job, but yet here's a personal message from Aaron, and he's literally at his desk. It's not high, video like production value. It's literally him with his phone and saying, "I'm so grateful I had the opportunity to provide an estimate for your family. We care deeply about you and the community you served. If we can ever be of service for you for the next project, I hope you'll consider us using us." And again, it's a video of him saying this to the homeowner, and he was saying how many times they get the second call because the first company screwed it up, and then they've got this personal message from the founder of this now $100 million company, but it's a message just expressing his gratitude for being able to serve the homeowner. And like those little trust signals, again, now they had seen the trucks all over, they had seen billboards, they'd seen all these other things, and now they've got this message from the founder as well. So like all those little things just really work together, and most companies will not go to that level of detail.
Yeah, so Justin from Chirp was actually my first guest on this podcast. We talked about that campaign specifically, and I
Yeah.
loved the idea. We have a similar one. We have a postcard campaign through Service Titan Marketing Pro that our franchise owners can turn on, and it's basically a, hey, thanks for the opportunity. We understand you may have went with another service provider. We're here when you need us. We put a little offer on it that they can use at
Yeah.
any time. So similar idea,
Yep.
not as personal as the video. I love the video touch. But yeah, if you book a job with Zoom Drain online, once you hit submit, you get redirected to that video that I described, what to expect.
Yeah.
And then we send text messages throughout the journey to the customers with links to that video. They do actually get a headshot and a bio for their technician,
Yeah.
so they know exactly who's going to show up.
Bio is great because especially if they're local, if their kids go to this same high school, like, all those things add a tremendous amount of trust. And again, when we talked earlier about how many touches it took for someone to remember, every one of those impressions again are registering in their mind. And that's the other part too when you think about branding and why like generic branding doesn't resonate the same way that unique branding does. So if I've seen the same clip art logo, if I've seen the same type of sun and snowflake for that HVAC contractor, like it's not meaningful to me. And when it's not meaningful to me, I can't remember it, and I don't have a reason to remember it. There's a really cool video that I use in my presentations for a plumber in Oklahoma that we did their branding for. The name of the company is Maston's Plumbing, and we did their branding. And he was wearing a shirt with his branded, logo on it and everything. And he had someone in a supermarket like tap him on the shoulder and say, "Hey, you from Maston's?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah, it's my company." She goes, "I was behind your van the other day, and I have to tell you, you have the most amazing logo." And it just meant so much to see that image because it reminded me of a period where plumbers were honest and trustworthy. And she's like spouting all this stuff out, and she was just sitting behind him in traffic. And that's the impact that the brand had. Now, if I had a pipe wrench and a water droplet, is it going to have the same impact that it had versus this nostalgic image that was of a craftsman? So like those are again just the things that we try to think about is making some of those connections, having empathy in those connections are really important.
It evokes emotion, and I think the best marketing and advertising and branding does just that. It
Yeah,
evokes an emotion, or else it's
100%.
unremarkable, like you said. One of my part of my role is playing, I hate the term, but it's true, brand police, especially in a
Hmm.
franchise system with 60 locations. I have to make sure that we're keeping the brand integrity intact and that nobody's
Yep.
abusing the brand or misusing it. There's a whole new opportunity to do just that, to abuse it and dilute the brand now with AI. Now that anybody with a computer or a smartphone can create AI generated slop. I love that term.
Hmm.
And there's some really cool things people can do with AI. I appreciate that. However, it's too easy, right? So now the market's going to get flooded with content that looks the same. It already is from a graphic standpoint. My feed's filled with the same poster reused over and over
Yep.
again, same fonts. But now even with videos, all of the
Yep.
video animations look the same, and they're weird. Somebody has an extra thumb. It's the brand color is different every time they generate it, or the logo, the word marks aren't actually real characters. There's something off
Right.
about it.
Right.
It seems off, and it's my job to make sure that the brand is always on point. So I love what AI can do, but I know you've been very vocal about the use of AI and kind of the dangers of just saying like, oh, we'll just use AI to grow our brand. Talk to
Right.
me about what you're seeing and where are people going wrong? What should they be cautious of as they move forward?
Well, it's really interesting because, our viewpoint on AI, you know, from our perspective of what we use it for as a company is it's always human first and human last. And AI in the middle can help with so many tasks. It's been a very useful too. The challenge that I see, especially in the home service space, is when you're using it to create content. And again, to your point, you scroll through Facebook or Instagram and literally every ad looks exactly the same or has the exact same hallmarks. And you're seeing again the dilution of their branding in that particular process. So wrong fonts, wrong colors, wrong messaging, generic imagery. And you're saying to yourself, if you're investing in branding, why would you have generic marketing at that point? And the other challenge is too, is, and it's not to say that home service owners or people on their staff aren't capable of creating an ad. Like, plenty of people use Canva before AI and did it with, reasonable success, right? But some of the people that are prompting aren't educated on what actually should go in an ad and what should not go in an ad. So um, AI is basically taking a summation of everything that is in its world and regurgitating it. That's why even using it for logos is really a terrible idea, because it's taking, a combination of things that it's seen elsewhere and it's trying to create something that feels like a combination of all these things. And a lot of times too, there's even trademark and copyright issues because it's not explaining to you that maybe what it just created to you actually belongs to someone else or could potentially belong to someone else. So copyright issues aside, you're seeing the sort of generic marketing that is diluting the effectiveness of it to begin with. And the other thing, quite honestly, and it surprises me because like I would say I was pretty vocal 6 months ago about some of the challenges of AI. And I think what's really interesting to me as a student of marketing is you want to make sure, first of all, that it's not just my viewpoint that is sort of shaping a perception of what's happening. But when you look at the comments on the ads that are using AI, it's brutal. Like, I'm like, Jesus, is the whole world graphic designers that are pissed off right now? Because so the backlash is surprising for me to see. Um, and there can't be this many graphic designers that are all pissed off at it. Um, a lot of them were just people saying, I will not use your company because of this AI ad. And imagine that. Imagine alienating people just because you chose to use AI to produce your marketing. And I thought that I thought that that was really, really telling that you're seeing that level of backlash against AI. And so I think there's a lot of caution. I actually think it's going to swing radically back towards doing it the way it used to be done in many instances. There'll still be the lowbrow AI stuff, but I think it surprises me to see big companies using it when, like, I think again, you're signaling to that consumer low effort, I don't really care. I'm just putting out content. And again, like that's the trust signal that you're eroding with your marketing. And so in my mind, I think you'll start seeing that come back because people will get that backlash. And it wasn't just like home service. Like I'm just talking about even regular ads for CPG stuff or anything. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
wow, there's people that are like not using your company, AI slop. Like, and I'm just like, wow. Like it's like,
It's tiring.
it was surprising to me.
It's tiring. It's all the same. You're just, it's just
Yeah.
getting, there was enough noise out there before AI came in of people pushing products and services, just advertising, screaming at us all the time, not connecting with us as individual consumers, not getting to know our needs or our wants, and I'm a big fan of educating people, and you keep pushing information out to build trust, and then you can ask for something. You have to earn that. And I think AI has kind of just expedited all of that. It's more noise coming from more people now because more people can put a prompt
Right.
in. And it goes back to, I think, the idea of effective marketing evokes emotion. And this AI generated content is soulless. There's really no human connection. I don't think people feel anything on the other end other than you're talking at me now. You're not getting to understand my wants or my needs to create content
Right.
that I'm going to respond to. You're just pushing it out there to check off a box and move on to the next task.
It signals like, yeah, checking off a box. Like, I don't care really enough about this message. So I'm just going to put it out there. And it was easy for me to do and low effort for me to do. So, again, anything that's screaming low effort about your brand just feels really contradictory. It feels like it's not helpful at all in the conversation that you're trying to have. And people will say, and it's funny because, the argument is like, well, a lot of these small businesses can't afford to hire a graphic designer. And I'm thinking to myself, is this a new phenomena that just happened? Or did small businesses always have budgets that they somehow found a way to make it happen? Even if they did it themselves in Canva, like at least they were trying to do something that was taking some effort. So I sort of don't buy into the notion that well, small businesses they don't have the budget to invest with a graphic designer to produce an ad. I'm like, well, what were they doing the other 5 years ago or 2 years ago? Like, what were they doing then? Like, so I think it's just a very convenient way to sort of try and justify, oh, well, we can't afford a graphic designer, so we have to use AI. Well, what'd you do before? Like, so it's weird. And I think, again, it's surprising, especially when we see clients of ours doing it, because then I say to myself, I don't understand why did we invest in branding then? Like what, and I'll take a screenshot and I'll send it to him like, dude, it's wrong font, wrong colors, generic imagery, clearly fake, truck imagery. Like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, this doesn't make any sense. So it's like I said, I think it'll be one thing that'll probably start swinging back the other way if it hasn't already started.
I think
And
it has.
when you start seeing a general consumer have that much antagonism towards I think that's something to really take note of and to just say, would I rather invest in having something professionally designed where I don't alienate a potential customer just by how my ad was produced? Like, imagine alienating the people you're selling to just because you used AI. So eventually I think it'll swing fully back the other side.
I think we're already experiencing that. I see it in from a graphic standpoint, video content. I mean, even look, I think there are some really awesome AI voice agents out there now that can help you after hours. I don't think it's
Yeah.
necessarily a bad thing, but I know there are people out there that as soon as they know that it's not a human on the other end, their attitude changes. They may hang up or they may now go into the interaction at a different place. But even just from a content perspective, there are, I know you're in Jersey, right? So
Yes.
is that right? Yeah. So, we're on this side of the bridge, big time Eagles fans. My whole feed's filled with Eagles content. And there are now all these kind of like fake sports pages they're pushing content out that's clearly generated by AI, Dan, but it's wrong. I mean, they're citing stats and players from 5 years ago that aren't even on the team, and they're like churning out these rumors that are just so ridiculous, and it's scary because there are people out there who don't know the difference and are going to buy into it.
Right.
So as soon as I see that content now, unfollow, so start cleansing my social feed. So let's go back for a minute. Before there was AI, about 10 years ago, you had mentioned Ellen Rohr, one of our co-founders. She worked with your team closely to rebrand Zoom Drain. And can you kind of take us back in time about 10 years ago, and what was Zoom Drain then? What did you find, and kind of walk us through that process and how you helped transform Zoom Drain into what it is today?
Yeah, I think it's actually interesting because you see this often with franchise brands that have a couple of successful locations and then they decide, hey, this could be something that I can franchise. The challenge is that so many of them start with a poor brand foundation. And I think that that's what Ellen found herself in, is that, hey, this brand was, maybe good enough to help us get going, but is not going to take us to where we want to go. And it's ironic because I see so many franchisees that, franchisors, I should say, that start a franchise with having a really weak brand. And I actually am a partner in a franchise brand called Insulation Commandos, and I've gotten to see firsthand how powerful the brand is in attracting people to be interested in buying a franchise. And the brokers themselves are like, oh my God, like selling a franchise for your brand is so much easier than any other in this particular space because no one has a brand that is doing what your brand is doing. So when she came to us, the prior brand, I think, just had fundamental challenges in the way in which it was designed. And even the truck wrap was kind of a mess of a lot of different concepts happening all at once. And she said, Dan, I want to have something that's very clean, that looks very modern, and that exudes professionalism. And we worked with her on that process. I think at the time there were maybe half a dozen franchises, maybe a few more. I think there was the one in Philly, like you're the one that you're nearby, right? And then
Yeah.
she had the ones out in Long Island, and she had so what amazed me about Ellen, and Ellen is just one of the smartest, nicest people in the industry. I've learned so much working with her over the years, and grateful to be a friend of hers. She had an amazing way of curating the comments and the commentary from all these different people, and having them feel like they had a voice in the process, but yet still being able to guide it in a very strategic fashion. And I remember when she first contacted us, and she said, well, I'm going to have several of the owners involved in this process. And normally that would be a huge red flag because the more people that are involved in the process, the higher the likelihood is that you will either never finish that project, or what is actually the final product will not be something that you're 100% proud of or fully behind because it got watered down, because the committee wants to distill it into something that feels comfortable, and comfortable typically never moves the needle in a significant fashion. So everyone's worried about going out on a limb on doing something that feels radical because they worry that they're going to be the ones blamed for doing something radical. But she
Sure.
had such a masterful way of getting everyone on board with this. And you see one truck. When I remember when we rolled out the first truck, it screamed franchise to me. Like it looked exactly, and that was the commentary that they started really getting, was like, oh my God, I see your vans all over. How many franchises are there? Like you guys are all over. And it wasn't like at that point we really were all over. And even in the markets that they were in, maybe it was one or two vans, but they were
Yep.
so striking and they were so bold and so distinct that they generated a lot of impressions, and it stuck with people. So I think it was a great move. You look at the old trucks, and I think I would say that they were again functional, but they were missing the element of that professionalism that I think is what Zoom is today. And I think that was the part that she had the vision to understand that what they had today was not going to take her to where she wanted to take the franchise in the future. And a lot of guys, a lot of owners struggle with that. You know what I mean? That's the thing that they say is the reason why they shouldn't change, is because, well, we got to here with that. Why would we ever change? And she looked at it and she's like, no, like it's amazing what we did with what we have, but I want to
Yeah.
go in a much different space, and I can't get there with what I have. So it takes a lot for an owner to sort of be introspective about the brand and to actually be self-aware enough to actually say that. Tommy Mello at 30 million in revenue said my branding sucks. Like 30 million in revenue, I don't know, dude. Like it can't suck that much, can it? But
Yeah.
like he knew it wasn't going to take him to where he wanted to go. And I think that often that's the question you have to ask, is you have to say, does the brand represent who we are today and what we've evolved into, and more importantly, where we want to go? Or is it just a representation of where we started and what we used to be? And answering that question, again, you have to be honest and you have to be introspective. And sometimes owners are not the best people to be introspective about it because they're very proud of it. It's their baby, and I get it. It's like telling someone that their kid is ugly. It's like the same thing.
It
But
is. Yeah.
if you had an ugly kid and you had asked a stranger, "Hey, is my kid ugly?" They might tell you, but your family's not going to tell you. Like your friends aren't going to tell you. And so it took, even for Tommy, it took Al Levy to be the one to basically also explain to Tommy, hey, bro, this truck is terrible. This brand, we need to change.
Dan, in the book, kind of a plug for you, because you just talked about not just where the brand has gotten you today, but is it going to take you where you want to go? You have a playbook basically that your team generates for its clients that talks about the vision, mission, values, the brand voice, the brand story. Can you just give me 30 seconds to a minute on that process and the deliverables? That way, anybody watching at home who maybe they've been thinking about their brand, maybe they want to reach out to you, what should they expect working with KickCharge Creative? And then if you can also at the end of that talk a little bit about kind of that maintenance program that you've created too, so you don't lose sight of the brand and stray too far away.
Yeah, I think a lot of people start the process with a misunderstanding on what the brand is supposed to do. You know, a lot of people come to us initially and hey, we just want a really cool truck wrap. And I'm like, yeah, we can do that. Like, that's fine. But underneath that wrap, what does this brand signal? What does it communicate? What is the storyline behind it? If this brand was a living entity, how would it speak? What would it sound like? If it was talking to you at a party, like what would it say to you? And so when you look at brand story and how we develop brand storylines, first of all, we're very deliberate in making it useful for a contractor. Part of the challenge, I think, in a lot of brand story products that are out there is that they're very pie in the sky and they're not actionable for an actual home service company owner. So we were very deliberate in making sure that what we were going to be able to provide to them would have value so that they can use this as a roadmap. So even if they didn't work with us in the future, like maybe they're going to have someone else that handles their social media. Well, this will give them the foundation on how that brand should sound, how it should live and breathe, what the aesthetics of it look like, the voice of it. So brand voice is something that's very critical to that notion of creating a brand story guide and what that looks like. So we love doing that when we have the opportunity. We've done it for many companies. I think it again just serves as of a good foundation for other people, especially if they're going to be touching their marketing, because they can say this is on brand or this is off brand. So how we speak, how we talk, what type of visuals, what the graphics look like, that can all be fleshed out. The other program that we launched, um, we call it Power Hours, and basically it is something that speaks to the core problem that we were seeing after we launched brands for people, is that they would have other companies touching their marketing and then it would slowly start getting diluted. So we'd see wrong fonts, wrong colors, wrong visuals that were being used in ads. And it was frustrating to us again because we would look at that and we would say, you're putting out content now that runs contrary to what the actual brand identity is, and that didn't make any sense. And to their defense, we were probably way understaffed for the last couple of years, and so like if they needed an ad, it was like, oh, we needed 2 weeks to do an ad, and timing became a challenge. So I understood that that was a problem on our part that we needed to solve. So we hired up and we created this program that basically gives you front of the line service as well. So like if you need an ad done in 24 hours, like we could probably accommodate that and make that happen. But basically it gives you a block of hours that you pay monthly towards, and we could use it for anything that you would like. And so it's nice because, again, I need an ad or I need a billboard, I need a wall wrap for the office. You can just use those hours and it's discounted as well. And that no matter what, it's going to be on brand and on voice, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. We're going to have to reconnect after this conversation. This was awesome. I could keep asking you questions and talk about this all day. And I really mean that. I want to plug the book one more time. Anybody who works in home services should order this, Branded Not Blanded by Dan Antonelli. Dan, thank you so much for being an awesome partner, for joining us today, for sharing your wisdom with our audience. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Appreciate it, Pat. Thank you.